Now, Sir Vince Cable has urged disillusioned Labour and Tory voters to jump ship to the Liberal Democrats and come together to fight Brexit. His comments come as the former Prime Minister Tony Blair dismissed claims that there could be a new centrist political party in Westminster. So can the Lib Dems actually be that party and form the new centrist force in British politics? Joining us to discuss that from Westminster, the former Lib Dem advisor Sean Kemp and Richard Angell, Director of Progress, a centre-left think tank.
Good afternoon.
Good evening. Sean, I'll start with you. You used to work for them. The Lib Dems, Sir Vince Cable, who was on this channel a few minutes ago, saying that they can be that vehicle. He doesn't want a new party. Tony Blair says that'll be impossible. Can it be the Lib Dems, really?
It can be, I think. I think there's no doubt that the Lib Dems are still, if you like, certainly damaged by coalition. You can still see that in the poll ratings. But I think the Lib Dems would argue they've seen some better council election results recently and they can start to sort of pick their way up. I would say that any move for the Lib Dems to do that is going to be quite a long process. There's not going to be some overnight transformation, I think, when the party suddenly bounces back to being at 20-odd% in the polls. It's going to be, I think, quite a long, hard slog to do it. So really what they need to do and what they are, I think, trying to do is they're trying to open up the party a bit, make it more accessible for more people. But there are so many other little groups and so on that have started. I mean, there are more sort of supposedly new centrist parties that have started. The Lib Dems have MPs, I think, at the moment. So I think what they also need to do is work out how, with a lot of these other organisations and campaigning groups, how do they sort of coalesce with them? How do you get a kind of unified force of all these people who say, well, we'd like to see a new centrist politics? How do they actually unite in some fashion? And to be frank, the way Westminster politics is at the moment, that might be quite tricky.
Richard, what do you think?
Well, I think the Lib Dems have got a bigger problem from the coalition, just their poll rating. I think it is attacked them morally, the fact that they were in there with the Tories, making the worst of austerity through those years that they're in government. Disastrous decision by David Laws when he went into the Treasury with George Osborne that's caused us catastrophic effects for our economy that continue to this day. And Vince Cable called on the Lib Dems and moderates across the country to work together on fighting Brexit. I think those of us who've been fighting Brexit in the Labour Party would welcome the Lib Dems getting involved. They've missed key votes on Brexit in the last few months, so we welcome them joining the pitch. But you can't be the centre of politics if you aren't on the pitch, and the Lib Dems are fighting to even get on the telly, let alone making some serious arguments.
Yeah,
and the currency in British politics is consistency, and the Lib Dems have backed up a Tory government and try and write articles about how they're now the left wing. They're just not, and they don't have the currency for the future of British politics.
That's interesting. Sean, what do you think? Sir Vince Cable himself has missed a couple of votes, hasn't he? What has been seen as key Brexit votes, and what Richard's saying about being on the pitch. Is that true?
Well, I mean, I think Vince would admit that he should have probably been there for the votes. It wouldn't have made any difference if he had been, I should point out. And I think the Labour Party is given the chaos in the Labour Party about what they're going to do about Brexit, although we now know what they're going to do is just vote for the most political advantages themselves, no matter the damage to the country. I think Labour are in a complete mess on Brexit, only rivaled by the Conservative parties. And actually, the Brexit is one of the places where the Lib Dems actually have a very clear, consistent position. They know what they're campaigning for.
Sean, given the chaos that you've just outlined, the Lib Dems should have done a lot better if that is the case, at sweeping up some numbers.
I think it goes back to actually what Richard was saying. There's just an issue. When you have a dozen MPs, you're not on telly that much. You're not discussed that much. It's very hard to cut through to like ordinary voters. That's why I was saying earlier on, actually, it's a slog, because most normal people, understandably, don't pay that much attention to politics. So it takes time. You can't, even if you have, the greatest positions in the world and you think you've got, the best sound bites and the best policies and so on, it takes a long time. And, for most people, the Liberal Democrats, the cut through to ordinary voters was maybe a bit at the election, and previous to that was the coalition. So the sort of new era of Liberal Democrats, if you like, and what they're saying about Brexit, it is going to take them a while to get through, and it's going to require patience. It isn't the kind of thing where people are just going to see Lib Dems all the time. They just won't.
Richard, that issue of cut through and specifically to centrism and centre-left, centre-rightism in general, is it going to be quite tough, and as Tony Blair said, maybe impossible, for any sort of centrist movement to cut through? Because people are pretty apathetic if they're centrists, potentially. It's much easier to take a left or a right stance on something than a centrist one.
I think the Lib Dems' bigger problem is not that they don't have enough MPs to get on the telly, it's that they haven't got anything distinct to say, and that feels like the problem generically for the centre of politics. But In the Labour Party, the centre is coming back. It is coalescing around new ideas about how to run the economy, how to protect our public services, and how to have a foreign policy that doesn't just back the underdog, but tries to bring about peace through dialogues and working together with other people. And that's got to be the terrain that we're in. And quite frankly, the Lib Dems are nowhere to be seen on that issue. It is in the Labour Party that the momentum for moderates will come back, and the organisation to do it is the one I lead in Progress.
Sean, you're nowhere to be seen on that?
I think that's one of the most comical bits of political analysis I've heard for quite some time. The centre in the Labour Party can't even be heard within the Labour Party. The idea that they're coming back when they're being routed at every turn in their own internal disputes is I think, a bit bizarre. You can't pretend at the moment that the centre in the Labour Party is being heard even amongst its own MPs and in its own internal debates. There is a real problem here, and that a lot of sensible centrist people in Labour are currently looking at going into a general election where they're going to be asking for people to vote for someone to be Prime Minister that they themselves don't think would be a very good Prime Minister. So I think that kind of craziness that we're currently seeing in politics, where we could end up with Boris Johnson against Jeremy Corbyn in the next general election, that kind of craziness of quite extreme populist politics on both the Labour and Tory sides is where in the long term the Lib Dems see there might be an opportunity.
But talk about...
Richard, sorry, can I just put that point to Richard? I mean, Sean's not wrong, is he, Richard? And John Landsman, indeed, in response to Tony Blair's comments today, saying Tony Blair was never in the right party. There will never be a return to his politics in UK Labour. The centrist voice isn't being heard.
Well, John Landsman
even in the Labour Party
continues to be petty about these issues, and I think his arrogance will end up being his undoing in the Labour Party. Nobody has a particular right to run any particular party, and their ideas don't last forever, and nobody has a monopoly on good ideas. But the Lib Dems, it's not like they've even got a candidate for Prime Minister. Vince Cable is going as soon as Brexit is done. We don't know who will be leading the party at the next election, and Jo Swinson, who is the front runner for doing that job, is somebody who is as tainted by her association with the Conservative government before. She was PPS to Nick Clegg, PPS then to Vince Cable when he was bringing in tuition fees, and served herself as a minister in a Tory government. So the future for the Lib Dems is not a particularly bright one, whereas Labour was able to bring in more new MPs at the last election from the centre-left tradition than the Lib Dems have MPs. So don't write off the future of the moderate wing of the Labour Party and those who are renewing the ideas for centre-left politics in Labour.
Last word to Sean. We've only got 20 seconds. Do the Lib Dems need a new leader in order to convey this message, Sean?
Well, they're going to be getting one. I think they're going to need a leader who's going to be there for the long term. That's what they're going to need. It's going to be a long slog, like I said, and it's going to need to be something that's going to be there around for quite a long time.
OK, Sean Kemp, Richard Angell, thank you for speaking to us today. Appreciate it. Let's return to one of our main stories. People around the world have